Cade Wells here, Harrisburg North Middle School, the Wizard Wells. Today I want to talk about resistant students. It's been a couple of weeks, been busy, getting busier all the time, playing dad and playing teacher, as everybody knows, is a very taxing lifestyle. But the last video of the series of resistance is for students. And I've brought this up many times in other videos because it always seems to be on my mind. Resistant students. So you're going to have resistant students. If you're a teacher and you're giving instruction, whatever it is, even if it's Dungeons and Dragons, and you think there's no possible way anybody could ever, not want to do this, you're wrong. There are going to be kids who don't want to do it. So I'm going to talk about the type of kids that will be, and how that is a reverse from what you would normally see from regular classroom instruction. So I've been known to coin this person the Susie Q. Susie Q is your resistant student. Susie Q is usually very good at everything. Susie Q has always been praised for intellect. Susie Q has always been praised for hard work. Susie Q gets good grades. Susie Q gets high test scores. Susie Q does not want to play your game. Why? The real answer that I've discovered over the 10 years of doing this is that it puts them so far out of their comfort zone that they feel just awkward. The level of misunderstanding is so high that they shut down basically. And then of course, since it's not a normal academic task, they want to know why they have to do this. Just like when a kid reads Shakespeare and they say, when are we going to ever have to use this? Why do we have to know this? I mean, guys, it's the same thing. It's literally the same thing. In fact, as an English teacher, I'll be burned at the stake for saying this, but learning how to play D&D is actually more important than Shakespeare. I love Willie Shake. He's my guy. But like the activation of the knowledge sets of literature in our modern world, like, yeah, it's cool to like know about it and be able to discuss it and so forth. But like being able to identify the themes of William Shakespeare's major plays at your job, probably not a thing. The ability to access a database using variable numerics of the core mechanic to be able to recall and retrieve information to use in your life is seemingly a little bit more important these days. So I just want to create a comparison of like what we feel and what we think and what is actual reality. And so what we're seeing this day and age is D&D becoming that actual reality, because I've watched it literally help kids. So back to resistant student. It's going to be the student that you wouldn't expect to be resistant, because if you can imagine being in their shoes and they've always been very good at everything and being praised for being good at everything, then when something is finally difficult and actually truly difficult, and they don't just understand it right away like they have with everything else in their life, they're going to be upset. And then they're going to go home and they're going to be like, I don't know, understand, we have to do this. And then the whole thing starts and you have to have all these conversations. So how do you deal with these resistant students? How do you get them to buy what you're selling? I can maybe help a little bit. So the first thing I do is find the resistant student. They're going to make themselves known probably immediately. They're going to hear you talk about this and you're going to be very excited, and everyone else is going to be excited, and they're going to be like, I hate you. I want you to die. You're going to see the look on their face. You're going to see the frustration in their page turn. You're going to hear, the deep sighs of whatever. The first thing I do is talk to the kid and say, I see that you're having trouble, or I'm sensing that, this isn't your thing. Get them to tell you the truth. Like, you have to be cool. You have to approach it. My room is a gaming environment. So like, I expect everybody to be able to talk to each other, including students, to me without, reservation, right? Like, I want to know what their thoughts are, so that I can maybe help them. The kids that are usually resistant to stuff, or the kids who are chronically behind on things, or the kids who, traditionally, don't get things turned in, or whatever it is, they're going to love Dungeons and Dragons. They're going to absolutely love it, because they've never had an opportunity like this before, where they can, exhibit their type of learning. The kids that, suffer at traditional schoolwork, Dungeons and Dragons, as hard and complex as it is to learn and to play, the kids that resist traditional learning will equate to D&D very, very, very quickly and eagerly, and will be ecstatic at the opportunity to play this on Fridays with their peers, etc. The Susie Q, if you can say, hey, Susie, look at Johnny, like, that Johnny doesn't usually like to do things, or Johnny's always, struggling to get things done or whatever. And you guys have been to school together a long time, so you're familiar with his personality, and just say, just look at him. Like, look at how much fun he's having, just making the character, and like the excitement that everybody in the room has. And so I often say, I always say, I don't expect this to be your favorite thing. I don't expect you to play it for 30 years like my friends and I did. I don't expect you to play it outside of school if you don't want to. The expectation is we spend Fridays together playing this game with your friends, with your peers, whatever. That's it. And then you often say, are there not worse after they played a little bit, right? They play a couple times, and then when they see their group members start having fun, and like their activation is going to be really limited, right? They're not going to be that active participant that you want or expect. And I always give them a little time, right? Like maybe a month, that's 4 sessions, after some training. But once you get into the 4th session, I think usually by the time the kids are like level 2 or maybe 3, the expectation has to increase that they are an active participant. This is a scholastic activity, and I'm about to share a rubric with you guys and go through it pretty extensively. So that's the second step in resistant students is you grade them. You let them know that you're going to be graded based upon your participation in this group as a character. And I'm going to share with you the standards, the criteria, and the 1, 2, 3, or 4 that goes with that criteria. So after the kids like get it a little bit more and they're playing and they're having fun, and your dungeon master has started to feel that group, culture or whatever, and everybody's a little bit more comfortable, the Suzy Q effect starts to minimize pretty quickly because they realize like this is actually fun. And although I don't understand it all, the other people around me are getting it, quickly. And as long as your culture is reflective of, what you want it to be, then the kids will help each other. And pretty soon you have a kid who didn't want to, who's now suddenly an effective character. And the really funny thing is if you kind of just pay attention to the groups that Suzy might be in, you'll catch them smiling by accident and accidentally having fun or laughing or whatever. And they end up enjoying it despite themselves, right? So the resistant student thing usually does go away once they realize that they're not going to just be able to whine to get out of it. Now, this is with the understanding that you've gone through the process like myself to be able to do this in schools and have shown that it is an equitable thing, that Fridays everybody's out of gas anyway, and this fills the tank again. Like the kids come in on Fridays very, very excited. Even the resistant student by this point in the year is like, oh man, sweet. Even if they don't love playing D&D, just that social element that they get with their peers for 1 day a week where it's not homework laden and they don't have to sit and write a paper or read through a book and answer analysis or whatever it is. The learning happens all right there in a cycle. So the resistant student usually does go away on its own kind of, but you have to be attentive to it. You want to be empathetic towards the child because you just have to be. I mean, like it's not a normal thing, right? It's tough to learn D&D. And so for bright kids who have always succeeded, this is where your problem's likely going to be, or with somebody who's just got such a bad attitude that they're literally going to hate everything that you do. And in that case, like there's nothing you can do except what I'm about to show you, which is to explain to them, this is a scholastic task that fulfills 5 power grading standards just through gameplay. We're not even talking about making a character or anything that goes with that. This is just while they're sitting down to play the game. So I'm going to share screen real quick with you, and we will go through that kind of quickly. Okay, so here it is. This is D&D grading criteria for gameplay. So the standard is up here. This is the actual power standard that gets utilized, that goes into the grade book. This is the exact language. I showed this to my class before this was going to roll into effect, and I read them these word for word. Read and comprehend complex literary and informational texts independently and proficiently. Apply knowledge of language to ELA to understand how language functions in different contexts and to comprehend more fully when reading or listening. Determine, understand, and apply word meaning, relationships, and phrases for reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Prepare for, participate in, and evaluate a range of conversations with diverse partners presented in a variety of media and formats. Adapt speech to a variety of context, ELA formats, media, and communicative tasks, demonstrating full command of formal English to present, express, and understand information. So the reason I put this up in front of the class is because I have a resistant student, okay? And you're always going to. So I put these up in front of them to express to them that these are like your grade book criteria. They're familiar with this language. They see it on their report cards and stuff. So they're not unaware of these things, and to put it in front of them in such a way. And then since they played some D&D, I asked them once, read and comprehend complex literary texts. Have we done that? And they're like, yep. Okay, apply knowledge of language to ELA. So have you actually had to apply what you know from those books in order to use it? Yep. Okay. Determine, understand, and apply word meaning. We're talking about all the vocabulary, the beautiful vocabulary that's in Dungeons and Dragons. If you don't know what a skill check means, you can't play the game. That is actually understanding and applying word meanings, okay, to a context. Preparing for, participating in, evaluate a range of conversations with diverse partners. Like D&D literally is that, okay? And that's the easiest one to come up with, but the others are also very, very applicable. And then adapting speech, okay? So like you're supposed to be a character. That is adapting your speech. Okay, the media is the circle, the round table, the gameplay element. That's your media. It's a person-to-person media to express, present, and understand information. Like if you don't have any knowledge of the game, then you're not understanding what people are saying at the table, and you can't play. So you're going to score poorly. So let me go through the criteria really fast. For reading, comprehend complex texts independently and proficiently. That's understanding the text of the game. Literally is just understanding the text. And so I'm going to go down now to show you the 1, 2, 3, 4 criteria. So this is just what it is, understanding the game. Mastery in this category, player is prepared properly and character is leveled efficiently with accurate record keeping, showing that they could level up without any help and know their character's spells and special abilities without assistance. This is a kid who knows how to play the game. When they level up, they can open the book. They can do it all on their own. They don't need anybody's assistance to know where things are or where to put them. That player is a master at reading those informational texts, and they are understanding the text-based portion of the game. Stamp. Okay, like that's a 1, 2, 3, or 4. And so I'm just going to read you guys the 4s and understand that the 3 proficient, right? The player makes effort to be prepared, though they may not know exactly where things work. So it just goes down from there. Number 3, emerging. Player has only the most basic understanding of their character text and has trouble navigating the book. And then not present. Player has little to no knowledge of how to prepare their character for gameplay and cannot navigate the text. So just understand it's 4, 3, 2, and 1. 4s are good, 1s are bad. And, you really don't want orange and red. Orange and red is like, I'm only here because you make me, and that's it. Okay, so next is applying the knowledge of language to ELA to understand how language functions in different contexts and comprehend when we're reading and listening. That's gameplay. That's knowing what your character can do and knowing when and how to do it. That's different than the text. I mean, the text will inform this, but this is the application. So your character sheet's done. That's understanding the game. Then it's time to play that character. Well, if you're not applying your knowledge from the character creation process into the game, then you're not applying the knowledge to the game. So then you're failing, right? Knowing what your character can do and knowing when and how to do it. So that has to do with, waiting your turn and being patient and then understanding what your character is supposed to do when that time comes. The mastery in this, the player knows what to do and when to do it. The player is ready to act and react appropriately during their turn, as well as engaging in interactivity between other players and DM when not actively taking an initiative turn. Player knows where to look on their character sheet for activating elements required for gameplay and does not need assistance with finding or using these. In other words, like you got to know how to use the character sheet that you got from understanding the game. So if they don't know where to look for their attacks or saving throws or skill checks or equipment or gold or pick a thing, then they are not, proficient in this gameplay element because they don't know what their character sheet actually does. Okay, so then moving on, determine, understand, and apply word meaning, relationships, and phrases for reading, writing, speaking, and listening. This has to do with ultimate participation within the group and willingness to participate. Okay, the willingness to participate. I know that determining and understanding word meanings might seem kind of weird, but the idea is if you don't spend any time at all or zero brain power ever looking at the terms that exist in the book that create the game system itself, you are not going to be a participant. Okay, you're not going to know how to be a participant. So you'll see some of these seem a little similar. They're just different enough to work as a power standard. Okay, so mastery in this is the player strives to understand game concepts to become a better player and group member. The player is thoughtful in listening and decisive in sharing their character voice and actions within the group. Their participation is clear in all respects, and they may even help the participation of others. Okay, participation and willingness to participate. This one, this might seem like this should go here, and I looked at this for a really long time, and of course, there's probably going to be revisions to this. I'm not perfectly happy with it yet, but it works for now for the tool that it stands for. Preparing for, participating in, and evaluating a range of conversations with diverse partners. That's culture, okay? In other words, does this player add to the culture of the table or do they detract from the experience? And it's easy as that. Like, is this kid fun to play with or is this kid not fun to play with? It's really that simple. The mastery in this category, the player is prepared in all respects for gameplay, has a good attitude towards the event, and seeks to enrich the experience for their DM and fellow players. The player is always an active participant and does not need to be goaded into using their character. In other words, they act on their own. They don't need their DM to say, hey, you who has said nothing for the last 30 minutes, what do you want to do? That would be a character who needs to be goaded, right? That's not good. Now let's talk about this in terms of attitude, okay? Has a good attitude towards the event. Now you would say, well, why are you grading a kid on their attitude? And I'll tell you exactly why. I hope maybe you can already understand that this has to do with being prepared for, participating in, and evaluating a range of conversations with diverse partners presented in a variety of media and formats. If you are soggy bottom, you are not prepared to participate in that conversation, which is D&D. You're not, and your culture, your anti-culture is bringing your group down for sure. The reality is if the student perpetuates into the lower categories, they will be given something else to do that's not play D&D, because they're just taking up a spot at the table that's taking a turn that somebody would want to play, right? So this is your player culture. Do they add or detract from the experience? And this purple bar, by the way, is the student language, right? This is the student-friendly language, and kind of just to help teachers align themselves of this is what it actually looks like, and then the 4, 3, 2, 1, right? Adapting speech to a variety of contexts, ELA formats, media, and communicative tasks, demonstrating full command of formal English to present, express, and understand information. So this is the actual role-playing element. Family, if you're teaching kids how to play D&D, this will likely be the last thing that really evolves with efficacy. Kids have, fears and stuff, stresses. They're not confident enough in themselves yet to play a character that's not them, and use some sort of voice or voice patterning or something. But ultimately, you want them to understand you're playing a character that's not you. So does the character come to life and have a personality of some kind, right? You don't have to be super picky about this. You just want them to understand that you are not your character and your character is not you. Okay. And your character should end up being as much of a real person in your imagination and the imagination of the peers at your group as you can manufacture them to be. So if all you do is you show up and you just be yourself on this piece of paper and you roll dice or whatever, that's not role playing, and you're going to score poorly in that category. But I'm going to be very honest and tell you that this is slow to evolve. Okay, this is very slow to evolve. So you have to be patient. As long as they're practicing the game and they go to the books and they, they're doing all the things, the role playing will come with time, and that's when you'll really see them about Christmas time. Coming up on Thanksgiving, they really start loving the game and understand how much fun it is when they all do this very thing together. When they're all playing a character, the 4 category in this, the player does well at bringing their character to life in role playing. The character has a clear personality, ideal, bond, and flaw, as well as a goal and motivations that the player uses to drive the adventuring spirit of their character. There's nothing worse than characters that have no goals. It's like, you're in town, what do you do? I don't know. Okay, do you want to go to the inn? Sure. Okay, you go to the inn, the bartender's there. Hey, welcome travelers to the Sleepy Tree Inn. You want to do anything? Okay, so you get it, right? If you don't have motivation, we'd all sit on the couch and play PlayStation for the rest of our lives. That's what I tell the students. So your character has to want something, okay? And the background is designed for you to have those things to want, or add them, right? Whatever it is that your character wants. Maybe it's just they want to be wildly wealthy, and that's why they started being an adventurer. That's still a motivation. So that character is not just going to go to the inn and sit in a chair next to the fireplace. They're going to be looking for an adventure so they can go get some money. Okay, so they should be able to have a goal. All characters should want something, and it's the player's job to seek this out for their character. The character acts like a real person would from situation to situation, and in general, the player's choices and actions are realistic actions that someone might actually take. The role playing of the player excites other players and makes the game more fun for everyone. If you're a D&D player, you've had this player in your group. It is always incredible to have this player in your group. Everybody wants this player in their group, and it does up the ante for everybody. I mentioned this, the character acts like a real person. Now we're in a fantasy role-playing world, right? So I explained that we're in a fantasy role-playing world, but your character, if they were real, would not do the stupidest things to draw trouble, to create unneeded danger, to they get, you know, they get too used to video games. And of course, I remember being 12 and 13 playing D&D, and you do goofy stuff, and that's fine. You want them to be able to be children and be goofy, but you also want them to help understand that this is a writing tool, like this is a storytelling tool, and you want your story to be good and dynamic within that fantasy world. And so, yes, silly and funny things happen in our gaming sessions. Yes, that's absolute reality, and that is part of the game, is to be able to be silly, because that's what we don't get to be in our normal lives. What you don't want is kids, you know, doing PvP during a dungeon, like you're fighting a monster and you turn to fight each other. No real person in the world. There are plenty of people in the military who don't like each other, and when the enemy comes over the hill, they're all pointing the same direction. Okay, so this is kind of what I'm talking about, is this idea of emulation of reality. You're not going to walk into this village that you just got to after 2 days of travel and burn it down for no reason. Nobody does that. I mean, and if you did, like what I always tell my DMs, if you have evil actions, and I don't let my players be evil, but it seems to be an inherent nature within our human spirit just to be evil when given the opportunity, I said, if they do evil actions, bring swift and thorough justice. Okay. If they burn this village down, bring knights in full plate from, you know, out of the mist, if you have to flex your dungeon master power and let them know, like, people don't do this. You don't walk into a village and burn it down. That's dumb. If you were an evil supervillain, maybe you would do that with an army of undead behind you or something, but that's a quest. That's not what a player should be doing at school when you're playing D&D at school. You have to squash those evil intuitions that apparently people want to exhibit. And I remember being a kid, we did the same thing, right? Because you never get a chance to be bad, because everybody's always telling you have to be good. So you want to play this character that's bad out of this sort of dark need to get that part of our spirit out. I don't want them to do it at school. If they want to play D&D outside of school, be evil characters, knock yourself out. But this role-playing thing ends up being part of that. Like, if you're a character that breaks this stuff all the time, like, you're not role-playing a real character. And so I needed a context for them to be able to understand what it is that I'm trying to explain. Okay, so that's the mastery. It just boils down from there, and it gets you know, worse or whatever. This does work for dealing with Suzuki, because all of a sudden you've put up the grading criteria that they are used to seeing for things that they get graded on, and now all of a sudden they go, oh, he's really serious. Yes, I'm very, very serious about Dungeons and Dragons as a scholastic tool. I've never been more serious about anything in my entire life, except maybe my wife and my little boy. Okay, so this takes away a lot of the stuff. Also, this is great to show to your administrator, for the administrative conversation. This is ideal, because then you're proving beyond any doubt. And then if your administrator is still waffling, like, have them watch, you know, your D&D club, or if you get a chance to, you know, set up your game for Fridays, let them see the gameplay with this rubric in their hand, and they're going to say, yep, that is these 5 standards for sure. Okay, then how does this grading work? I have the dungeon masters do it. The dungeon masters are experts in their field. So they are the kids that were volunteered or voluntold, mostly volunteered, that this felt like them and that they would enjoy this kind of experience, and they run the game. Well, they're going to be, again, Danielson framework. When peers assess each other, that's a 4, okay, in terms of your culture, et cetera. And they have to be able to do this without, you know, hurting anybody's feelings or whatever. So all the player has to do is, there'd be a list of names here, you know, their group, whatever it would be, 5, I suppose. And then this category here, visible, would be the 5 different grading criterias. And then for each day that the kid plays, they just put in a 1, 2, 3, or 4. So say this guy has a little bit of trouble still finding things in the player's handbook, and always asks, instead of just using the table of contents or the index, always asks, they're in alphabetical order, is what I always say. But I mean, maybe they waffle, but they're eager and they're always, you know, trying. So I'd give them a 3 in that category. You know, then I move on, and this is gameplay, activation of gameplay. Well, I tell you what, this kid might not know where to look in the player's handbook, but they sure do know when to act with their character. They make effort to participate. This kid's always really eager to be here. They add to the culture. You know, they add to the culture, but sometimes they're a little soggy. And I'd like it if they, you know, amplified their emotions a little bit for the sake of our gameplay. And they don't quite have the role-playing element of a character figured out. Now, this is just one example of gameplay, and I put a little slash, and kids are absent on Fridays sometimes, and all kinds of things go up. All I wanted was a numeric value to track these events, right? That's all I really need. And then I can take the average and work out the math as I need to. But if I don't have anything for gameplay, then I don't have anything for gameplay. So then if I going through the dungeon masters rubric cards with their groups on it, if I see a kid scoring 1s and 2s, like, there's going to be a conversation. And how else would I necessarily know that that needs to happen. So this document allows me to do a number of things, including actually put in a numeric value for not just one standard, but for 5 standards, which means that a kid could use Dungeons and Dragons to really bring these standard grades up, these five grades. They could really bring up these 5 categories. Family, I only have like 12 English standards that loop and loop and loop and loop. So like when you're looking at 12, and I'm just spitballing 12, these 5 of 12, right? Like that's huge. So if a student's doing this with efficacy and they care about it just enough to, play on Fridays with their peers and be even a somewhat effective character, they could really bring grades up in these categories where if you give a presentation to your class and it's a really, really bad presentation, it's really very, very rare for teachers to do presentations more than a couple of times. So if you score poorly one time, you're pretty much done for. This allows these stranger participation type grades from doing presentations, makes them very, very constant, and actually is one of the crucial ways that this helps kids' intellect because of the synaptic path network that I've talked about, theory to concrete, through verbalization, through listening. The brain, when you're playing D&D, if you're actually doing it and you're a master, right, your brain is doing lots of circus work, and that's what really allows the brain to flex. So this is how you deal with a resistant student. It's not necessarily going to make it go away, but it should make it go better. I'm nearly out of time here, and so I'm going to stop the screen share. I'm going to say goodbye. I did this on Tuesday because yesterday was just a rough day for everybody, and the kids were all over the place. And since like 12 people watch these videos anyway, I didn't think it really mattered. This is Kade Wells, the Wizard Wells, Harrisburg North Middle School, living the dream. I hope you all have just the most greatest day. Goodbye.